Hello. Hello, hello. Good evening. Hi there. Thank you, Sean. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Becky Brown Girl Show. I'm your host, Becky Brown Girl, and tonight's conversation is going to be about the right to bear arms. Not these kind, the pew pew kind. Anyway, so I decided when I reintroduced the show for the third time that I was going to touch on topics that may not necessarily be, always topics that pertain to me, right, and in my life, but that I think are of interest to my audience and the broader community in general. And this particular topic, right, like religion and politics, can be controversial. So, but I'm embracing the controversy or the potential controversy, and have invited a friend who is the owner of Straps Gun Club to join me this evening for the discussion, to share his experience and insight and so on this particular topic, because I am not the expert. So with that, I would also like to add, right, part of the reason why I've never necessarily been an advocate for firearm use is because of all of the mass shooting events that occur, especially in the U.S. And so I've always thought maybe it'd be better if the laws were more restrictive in that regard, because people don't seem to be using them responsibly. And probably these people are not necessarily all there mentally. Nevertheless, I was more so on the side of we need less, not more. But in the last few years, engaging with family and friends, and discovering that some people that I know and completely unexpectedly are legal firearm owners, I thought it would be an interesting conversation to discuss with somebody, again, with the background and expertise in the topic, that could speak to the value in firearm ownership, particularly for communities of color. So, with that said, I have invited my guest, Jason, owner of the Straps Gun Club, which is based in New Jersey, to talk about legal and responsible firearm ownership and training. So a little bit about the Straps Gun Club. It focuses on firearms training for people of color, and they connect people to credible training outlets and resources in the 2A community. And I'd like to talk to him about what the 2A community is, because I have no idea. It was created in 2020 and operates as a group of local firearms enthusiasts who leverage shared knowledge to develop educated and lawful firearm ownership. So I'm going to go ahead and add him right now. If you guys have any thoughts on the subject in the comments, please share them in the meantime. Hello there.
Good evening, good evening, good evening.
Oh, we coordinated. We
Yeah,
got to
coordinated,
coordinate.
yeah. It worked. It worked out. It worked out.
Um, so welcome, Jason. Jason, is there anything that you'd like to share that I didn't in your
No,
intro about the
uh,
club,
no,
about yourself?
I'd like to first thank you for having me this evening. I think tonight's discussion is a valuable one. I think you shared everything that I'd like you to know, and that I think our group would like you to know about straps, and I'm happy to answer any questions and kind of dive into, your thoughts and your questions and concern about the 2A community. I would only preface it by saying that, no matter where you are on the side of firearm ownership or not, and how you feel about firearms, it's a very personal choice, and it is a right that people choose to exercise. And there are a myriad of feelings about firearms, and I think that every family who can should make their own choice. And that's my 2 cents, or kind of like introductory.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. Um, so with that said, the first thing I wanted to discuss is, if I can get my notes here. Bear with me a second. Um, have you always sort of been a proponent of gun ownership? Like, is it sort of ingrained in you from childhood, or is it something that you came to be interested in adulthood? And if you could just speak to that a little bit.
I grew up in a very dense metropolis, right? And so, like most like urban cities, when we talked about firearms, at least in the Northeast, firearms were more of a police thing and a criminal thing. You didn't hear much about legal firearm owners or military as well. It wasn't until I became an adult, went away to school and just experienced different communities, towns, primarily in the South, where there's just a more cultural conversation around firearm ownership and education.
Hmm.
That was not a talking point in my household. Personal protection was not necessarily a priority in my household, so to speak.
Hmm.
And I think that for me, once I became an adult, became a father, became a husband, that's when personal protection for me became a topic of interest.
Got it. That totally makes sense. And actually, you raised a point that I want to talk about a little bit later in the conversation, being in a densely populated area, because I know that they've recently made some changes to gun law in New York. I don't know if I know you're versed in Jersey law,
Hmm.
but if you know anything about that, I want to touch on that later. So put a pin in that
Right,
for
absolutely.
later.
Yeah.
Um, so if you could talk a little bit more about what inspired you to start
Well,
Straps.
it's really, really interesting. So I started. This is it's a weird story, but it's the absolute truth. So I became a firearm owner once I became a father. Got married, and looking to buy a home. You got your lady, you want to protect your lady, you want to protect your
Okay.
family. And the best way you look at the best way to do that, and I wanted to educate myself on how to own a firearm. And at the time, my wife is not from New Jersey. She's from the South. It was a lot easier to purchase a firearm in the South than it was in New Jersey. Just the
Mhm.
process is different. And I would be the first thing I would say, for anyone considering owning firearms, you really need to educate yourself on the laws, on possession, on ownership and use, and what protecting yourself really means, use of force. All those things are topics that I would highly encourage everyone to educate themselves on prior to firearm ownership. For me, I did not purchase a handgun the first time, I purchased a firearm. I purchased a shotgun, right? And people have mixed feelings about what's the first firearm you should use or own, or what's the best one you should use. But for me, it was a purchase of a long gun, and that shotgun, and right. And so, I learned everything I could about it. How to clean it, how to own it, with the safety, and just to keep my family safe. So me, that it really was internal. It was a personal decision to own a firearm. What I realized once I purchased my firearm, and I'll save you the long version, and got back to New Jersey, is that there weren't very many people like me, at least that I knew of,
Mm.
um, who were African American, interested in firearms. And when I went to the ranges, um, I didn't feel ostracized. I didn't feel discriminated against. I just didn't see a lot of people that looked like me. You
Right.
know, if I'm honest, it was a very warm, welcoming environment. It was a cool environment. A lot of people were very, very helpful, to
Mm-hmm.
kind of show you the ropes. But there was one common denominator. I just didn't see people that looked like me often. Um, and so I'll say again, to save the long story, I just came up with the name Straps, right? And I was just went through the process of creating a logo and getting it registered and getting the name copyrighted or trademarked and all those things, and
Mm-hmm.
what the process of an FFL and what that means, and creating a small group of people who were interested in learning about how to protect themselves and their family. We start off, and we still are a very small, tight knit group, but our focus is really educating individuals about the 2A community and really showing the positive sides of the 2A community. If you go to our Instagram, you won't see children with firearms. You won't see any negative behavior or things that could be constituted as criminal. We really try to educate people on the legalities of firearm ownership, but also the training necessary to safely and operate a firearm and essentially protect yourself and your family, or if you're into it for sport. There are a lot of organizations just like mine
Mm-hmm.
um, who focus on diversity. There are a lot of organizations like mine, Black Girls Shoot, a lot of great trainers out there, Body O Tactical, a lot of folks who are just really, really experienced and well versed in the community and that can share. I would advise, anyone interested in joining the 2A community to just do, see quick Google searches, check out your local ranges and find a community that works for you. They don't necessarily have to look like you, but where I'm from, I wanted to create that space. And so what we did was we just put out a call to some local guys. I literally just went up to people and was like, hey, you want to shoot with us? Hey, you want to shoot with us? And just started to create some organization. And we found a day that worked for everyone. Sunday, Fun Day, Gun Day. And so every Sunday, group of guys were in New Jersey for the gentleman or gentlewoman asked. And we go to Gun for Hire range, and we shoot together. We learn from each other. We kind of talk about personal protection and protecting our home and protecting our families. We talk about the art and science of different types of firearms, what works in what situation, and or you may have questions about what is the best firearm to own first, right? And so we
I
talk about
did. You
yes,
see, you
right.
getting ahead of me
I'm
now.
sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. So, well, that's what made us create Straps Gun Club. So I'll be quiet there. I can talk a little bit.
A little bit, but that's okay. You're very well versed. I love to have an educated guest to empower the people, right? Knowledge is power. And not while you were talking, I just realized what 2A meant. Duh.
Second Amendment. Yeah. Second Amendment. Yeah.
Duh.
And my apologies for the acronym for
No, no,
anybody didn't
no.
get it. Second
No,
Amendment.
it's fine. I just I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Um, so you already touched on this and kind of. Um, and maybe you can talk more about why a shotgun was your first purchase. However, I wanted to share, I don't know how many of you in the comments are Chappelle fans. But in one of his comedy specials, he lives in Ohio, right? So he was talking about how he had somebody break into his home. So he immediately ran out to purchase a gun and bought a shotgun, and that the gun store owner told him he needed birdshot bullets. I don't if I'm
Yeah. No,
like using the
he
lingo,
said
you could
buckshot. Yeah,
and
if
buckshots.
I remember buckshot versus
Yes,
birdshot. Yeah.
and that basically he was saying that the bird shot
Pepper him
is,
up a little bit.
yeah, it
Yeah.
would pepper up the intruder, right,
Yeah.
as opposed to
Yeah. The buckshot
lethal
will.
force.
Yeah,
And a
buckshot
buckshot,
will lay him down.
yeah, a buckshot, I'm assuming, for a buck
Yeah.
is gonna rip a hole in him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but to that point, um I also heard and you can elaborate on this point and correct any misperceptions I have that um you have to. Oh, thank you. Because ever sending me birthday wishes. That you have to
Happy birthday, by the way. Happy
oh,
birthday.
thank you. That you have to, in order to claim self-defense if somebody breaks into your domicile, that you have to um retreat. You have to attempt to retreat and take cover before you attempt to use force against a person, which of course sounds crazy to me. If somebody's breaking into your house,
Good.
they probably mean to do you
Yeah.
harm, right?
Yeah.
So is that the case in New Jersey? Maybe can you speak to that a little bit?
I would.
And also why the shotgun was your first
So
um
I'll just like the use of force. So I would advise everyone really to take use of force training in New Jersey. It's actually required for individuals who are interested in owning a firearm to carry a firearm, and so everyone has to take use of force training. And then, I'll save you the long version, but the general version is that. Or at least I would say, I will tell you what my belief is as a father, and then I'll tell you kind of like the textbook definition. Um, the level of force that you use when protecting yourself, it needs to be justified. And so if you have a firearm, if there is no firearm present, um, there is a very understood um, case law and all that stuff. You guys can go research this. That you cannot bring a knife to a gunfight unless that knife is in the process of doing some bodily harm to you. And so the general understanding is that use of force needs to be justified by some sort of inability for you to either protect yourself by any other means but that firearm, right? And that's really, really important for folks to understand. And that changes by state to state. And so wherever you are in your state, I think the best thing for you to do is make yourself aware of the use of force laws where you are, right? And they look different throughout the United States, right? And self-defense is essentially exactly what it means to defend yourself. What are you defending yourself from? What type of threat are you defending yourself from? All those little nuances and any sort of potential threat matter, right? The process in which you use the firearm, what you do after you use the firearm, there are all things that need to make sense, right? When you use that firearm. Um, just because you got invite someone to a barbecue at your house and you get into a shouting match doesn't give you the right, to pull your firearm out because, they said a nasty name to you, right? There is a process in which you need to follow to make sure that how you um, use your firearm, how you move with your firearm are all within the confines of the law. Straps Gun Club, what we do is we take individuals and we use NRA trainers or certified trainers through the NRA who are qualified to teach firearm, not just safety, but use of force training as well. I am not a NRA certified trainer, but there are two in the club, right? Who we leverage and use to help anyone who is interested in shooting and owning a firearm to get them up to speed on the laws of where they are. As well as how to deal with situations and scenarios where a firearm is present. Maybe you don't have it, maybe someone else has it, right? How to own a firearm safely in your home, whether you have children or family, its accessibility, all those things. But to your question, in terms of the use of a firearm, the general understanding and belief is that there needs to be a credible threat against your life to use your firearm. And your first question was what again? I don't want to get too far.
No, I asked why the shotgun because I explained the Dave Chappelle
I like the
story.
way it sounds when I rack it.
Well,
You know what I
I was
mean?
about to say, right?
I like
So
the way it
I
sounds.
I
I
have a
like the way it sounds
permit.
when I rack it.
I have a permit, and I know in New Jersey that you, like, when you're, and again, I might be using the wrong terminology, so correct me if I'm wrong. You have to get a permit, and then you have to get a
Right. So there's
License to
yeah,
purchase, or am I mixing them up?
yeah, I could talk about the New Jersey process. So in New Jersey, unlike a lot of places, you need an FID, which is a firearms ID,
Hmm.
which is a card that says that you have been fingerprinted and a background check has been run on you, and you have met the qualifications by the state police, and your local police department to own and possess a firearm. With that, in New Jersey at least, you can purchase handguns as well as long guns. For each firearm, uh, pistol that is purchased, a handgun that is purchased, there is a permit that is required for that, and there's a 30-day period waiting period in which you need to wait to purchase each individual permit. And so, for example, when you initially fill out the application to get a firearms ID, which identifies you as a legal firearm owner, that is not the same thing as a permit to purchase a firearm, handgun specifically. Now, there is some nuance there in New Jersey. Now, as far as long guns, things that are at least 16 inches long, but yeah, 16 inches long, you do not need an individual permit to purchase that. So you can purchase as many rifles, shotguns as you like. But when it comes to smaller arms, like actual handheld arms, handguns, pistols, things like that, you need a permit to purchase those. And so that's some nuance there where there's some education needed. Those handgun permits do expire. Your permit to purchase a long gun, I'm sorry, your FID does not expire. At least mine doesn't. I think there's some laws that recently changed with regard to the FID. You need to get those renewed every few years. But in terms of like the handgun permits, you need to use those because they expire within 90 days. You can initially, at least in New Jersey, you can have three or more of them, but you cannot purchase an individual handgun until the time of 30 days, has lapsed, right? And so when I usually are interested in purchasing handguns, I usually get three permits, right? I think now they're like $25 or something like that.
You can
And you go down.
apply for that many at one time?
Yeah, you can apply for. Now, that is not the same thing as actually purchasing that many firearms at the same time because you can't. Um, there's two things that are required when you go to purchase a firearm: the actual, at least a handgun, the individual permit to purchase a handgun, and your FID. Those two things.
Bless
Excuse me.
you.
And what you're able to do is purchase your firearm from firearms, a licensed firearms dealer, an FFL, a federal firearms licensee, who is able to either sell you ammunition or firearms of your choosing. Yep. But I think that's important for firearm owners, specifically in New Jersey. The first step is to apply, and you can apply right on the New Jersey State's Police website. It's really, really easy. They walk you through the step and process step by step, but I would say that the process looks completely different depending on what locality that you're in. These the individual police departments, at least in New Jersey, again, if you're outside of New Jersey, this completely looks completely different than any other state. When I first purchased my firearm in South Carolina, I walked right into a gun store. It took me longer to decide which firearm I wanted rather than my ability. I literally just walked in there off the street, filled out a form. 10 minutes later, they're like, "What do you want?" The
So
background check is done.
hold on now. Okay, so let's just take a step back for a second.
Yeah,
Now, I understand, culturally down south,
yeah.
it's like they're like Onyx, throw your guns in the air, right?
It's not like that.
Everybody own a gun,
It's
right? You get a
yeah.
gun, and you get a gun, and you get a gun.
It's not
But
like culture.
why but what are your thoughts, being from up top with the sort of abundance of guns everywhere, and because they can open carry in a lot of those states, whereas like here it's a totally different ball game.
So
That scares me.
what's your specific question?
what
what are my thoughts
what
on
are
the
your
culture?
thoughts on, well, okay, first of all, what are your thoughts on the fact that like the laws to obtain a firearm are so lax?
Well,
Well, from my,
let's all
and
right.
that's my turn, I mean, that's my perception of it, that's very lax.
can we? All right, let's take this elephant in piece by piece.
Okay.
So I'll talk about there is a distinct cultural difference between firearm owners and ownership in different parts of the United States versus where we are here in the Northeast, right? And I think
Mhm.
that culturally, it is a I think culturally, there are more uses for firearms, either for sport in different parts of the country where there are more land, specifically in the South. There culturally is an association with firearms more for sport, you know, hunting sport, shooting sport, are two of the primary ones. And there's a group that I would highly recommend folks that are watching look into, the National Brotherhood of Hunters. They are hunters of color, and they are folks who literally go around the world hunting small and large game. And so if you're into hunting or firearms for sport, there, the National Brotherhood of Hunters is a really good organization that is nationwide, and they have folks who literally travel all over hunting all types of game, and can really be helpful in terms of education on, firearms from a sport perspective. But I will say that is the big difference between the North and the South. It is a cultural difference. The laws are different also. And so accessibility is one of the things that I think has shaped the culture here in New Jersey, where I live, versus other places. There are a lot of laws that kind of limit the immediate accessibility of firearms and how we move and carry them. I think firearms in the South, in some instances, are a cultural norm. Um,
I'm here. Sorry. I'm just, I need to plug.
no, no, it's fine. I just think firearms are a cultural norm in some instance. Um, but it's not in the way that we think here. Personal protection and the right to bear arms is a very, as I always say, a very personal decision, right? And there are those who really believe and embrace the Constitution in a really, really personal way. And so I think historically that has driven the cultural shift, right? And so where we are in the Northeast, um, the because of the density that we have and historic levels of crime and all of those things, I think that access to firearms and the restriction of 2A rights, in some instances over time, and I'm not a legal historian, there's been a need and requirement to limit access, right? And I think that the people who created these laws think they were well-meaning, right? But I think over time, um, as we can see with recent Supreme Court decisions, right, that the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, right? And I think that hardcore members of the 2A community would say, our approach has been heavy-handed, and recent Supreme Court decisions have kind of like upheld that. Like, we have been heavy-handed, and so now you have a culture in New Jersey that is shifting, and where people like myself, law-abiding firearm owners, are connecting with each other and talking and kind of like demystifying um, what firearm ownership is, what it means, and how to do it safely. Because it really is a scary thing, right? And I don't want to, like, when I was creating straps, I was going around to different banks and talking to different funders, kind of, to build an actual physical club and a shooting range and all those things. And we're talking to funders, and a week later, a mass shooting happens, right? These are real things that happen
Yeah.
around the country.
Like
Right,
weekly.
right. And so, I get where people are very afraid, right? And that's why I'm very, very sensitive to the discussion. And I always tell people, and whenever I'm talking about straps, I said that firearm ownership is a very personal decision. It's not one that anyone should take lightly. I feel like sometimes it's a family decision, right? If you're an individual person who is looking out for yourself, I think it is your decision to educate yourself. It's your not decision, but obligation to educate yourself if you so choose to purchase a firearm. But here specifically in New Jersey, recently we have the right to bear arms on our person, concealed. Concealed carry is in New Jersey, which is very new as of the last 3.5 years, right? Uh,
Anybody No, you have to do like above and beyond application for
It's
that, right?
so I'll go through the process. So I wouldn't call it above and beyond, but there's a lot of paperwork, right? And so I think the key component that everyone should be aware of is that there is a significant amount of training that you should have in, because here traditionally, and again, I can only speak for New Jersey. Many discussions around firearm have always been associated and connected with criminal activity or law enforcement or military use, not necessarily personal protection. Um, and so now, post Bruin, and the it was a case in New York, the New York Rifle and Pistol Club, post that decision by the Supreme Court, allowing individuals the right to bear arms on their person without some justifiable need, right? Um, People have decided, and I think that there's some geopolitical things moving throughout the country that make people are interested in owning firearms as well. People have decided that they want to take their own protection into their own hands, right? And that process requires the FID that we talked about earlier, right? It requires your fingerprinting. So you need to be a legal firearm owner. You don't. You have to show your mental health is intact, right? You can't. You have to show and prove that you haven't been committed to some sort of institution. You have to show and prove that that you have not declared war against the state or states,
How,
right, or
how
anything like that.
I guess they determine that through
Yeah, yeah. So
background
there's a
screening.
yeah there's a form and a background check that you go through, and for the average person who has not committed any crimes, above a traffic ticket, right? Because I got a bunch of them. That traffic,
Don't
you
tell
know,
on yourself now.
listen, I'm a normal guy, right? That is is relatively easy to get through. I think, to your point earlier, there are levels, right? The decision to walk around and carry a firearm, and like I saw someone earlier in the text that said, I have a license to carry, I have a firearm, but I don't feel comfortable carrying it. Would you say I need more training or feel more comfortable? I would absolutely say you need more training. I don't leave my house without my firearm. I'm comfortable using it. I found a firearm that works for me, that works for the way that I like to carry. I'm a kind of a big guy, right? And so when my first firearm was a full size firearm, I no longer carry that firearm. It's in, where I keep my firearms collecting dust because it's literally just too big. I take it out, maybe shoot it once in a while. I take it to qualify with, but other than that, I'd never carry that. I choose a firearm is really like putting on, a pair of shoes, right? You have to find out what size fits you, what you're most comfortable with, what size fits your hands, what are you most accurate with, what should there come a time for you to actually use and defend yourself or someone that you love, which are you going to feel most comfortable with? Those are all questions that you need to ask yourself when you think about, owning a firearm, specifically, especially carrying one with you day to day. Where are places that you can carry your firearm? You can, just because you have a firearm in New Jersey or in most places, where are the sensitive places? I think the exact naming. Where are the sensitive places where you're prohibited from carrying a firearm? Just a few schools, churches, daycare centers, public parks, zoos, things like that, major large concert areas and things like that. If a
So
store
then, how
or
the hell, if you outside, where can you actually take it?
there are a lot of places. There's definitely a lot of in my car. I'm the king of my castle.
So,
Um,
yeah, speaking of in your car, because you can't, like, don't you have to have the ammunition and the actual firearm separated, right?
well, again, we're talking about
Well, when
concealed
you're
carry.
when you're in the
Well,
car.
we're talking about concealed carry versus transportation, and those things are not the same. And so when you have a FID, which is the the which says you are legally able to own a firearm, that's not the same thing as concealed carry,
No,
right?
I
Yeah.
understand that, but I'm saying if
So
you
when
have
you're
a concealed
separated, if you
carry.
right, if you have a concealed carry, the firearm can be on your person in your vehicle. If you do not have a concealed carry license, CCW, there's a couple of different name forms depending on where you are. There's a certain manner in which you must travel and move in public with your firearm. That manner is usually having a firearm or firearms in a concealed case, unloaded. You can also travel with your firearms in airports, right? You can travel with your firearm, but the manner in which you fly with them and travel with them is where the laws and nuances come in. And I encourage everyone to take advantage of the free resources that are out there. You know, the TSA has a bunch of information.
I'm trying
If
to
you
get
reach out
people
to
arrested at the airport.
no, that happens. I see people all the time, you know, walk through the TSA screening area with the loaded firearm. Every airline has a manner and process for you to carry. I fly with my firearms all the time. I've literally flew all over the country with firearms. I've been on trains and buses with firearms. You literally just have to go through the process, ask the questions. Don't be scared. Pick up the phone, call the airline, call the bus company, whatever mode of travel that you have, and say, "Hey, listen, I have a firearm. I want to make sure I'm compliant. What's the process, right?" And they'll tell you, right? And it's usually in writing in the rules and regulations. And so there is a lot of education and reading in detail. One resource is uh, USS, I think it's UCCA. UCCA, I believe the name of the website is. USCCA is a national firearms website that will give you information about where you can carry, how you need to carry, the laws in each state. All USCCA, yeah, in one particular location. That's super, super helpful. But in terms of specifically for New Jersey, you know, when you're generally traveling with firearms, or even moving through state to state, if you're traveling from New York to DC or Maryland, traveling with a firearm is not the same thing as possession of a firearm on your person. If you have a firearm, it should be traveling with it. It should be in your trunk or in a closed compartment, not in the driver compartment. Let's say for giggles, for the trunk, um, unloaded, separated in a safe manner, right? And so those things are important as well. Um, I think that is something that I would hope that everyone would just kind of like take away from this. You know, ownership of a firearm is one thing, but owning it safely is probably more important.
Well, and again, that's what, I'm not like, my intention wasn't sort of to cast a judgment as to whether I think it's a good or a bad thing. I want to people to be informed,
Yeah, yeah, you
right,
have to be informed.
of what resources are available. And I assume if you're not in support of gun ownership, then you won't be here, right? But for people who
There's
may
a
be
book
interested in this conversation,
there's a
um
book that I'd like for you to for all your viewers to get. It's called Crime Proof. Um, the author's last name escapes me. His first name is Anthony. He's the owner of uh, st- um, Gun for Hire in Woodland Park, New Jersey. The name of the book is Crime Proof. So if you go to the Gun for Hire website, you can take a look at the book. I believe there's an e-version or electronic version, but the Crime Proof is a really good book for the first-time firearm owner. Um, and it goes over a number of things for individuals who are interested in owning a firearm and protecting their home and the people in the family and the ones that they love as well. It also talks about some things that you should have, right? I have some props here. A tourniquet, right? You know, these are
okay.
some things that these are some things that you need. You
I've
know,
never
because a lot
had
of people,
props on my show. This is
right?
exciting.
Props. This is a tourniquet, right? And this is a device. I'm not going to open it, but if you go to Google what a tourniquet is, it allows you to do. Is manage blood flow for an area where you may have a wound, right? You have some homostatic granules, right? These things are where you may have an open wound cavity somewhere on your body, right? And you need to clot that blood so you don't bleed out. Unfortunately, just because you have a firearm doesn't mean you won't get shot, right?
I mean,
Right? And so you
people
need
will
certain
be
things,
able to do all that when you laid
right?
out.
Right. You know, some real gauze pads, right? You need a chest seal, right? You know, you need these types of things to prevent you from bleeding out in the event that you have an open wound or cavity in your chest, right? You need to have all of these things near and with you when you are when you decide to own a firearm. You know, if you go on Amazon, um, just purchase a wound kit. All of these things and training, and this is what the gun club teaches you, how to use all of these things and just be comfortable enough, because when um I hate to use this cliche, when the bullets start flying, seconds matter, right? And so you may not necessarily need these things for yourself, but you may need them for someone that you're with. You may need them for a loved one. a friend, a family member. You need to know how to take care of yourself and dress a wound and not necessarily be scared or go into shock, right? Because you think about the use of a firearm is really, really scary. It's really, really loud, and wounds can be devastating. But I think the reason why we talk about training so much is because um, if you are trained or at least comfortable with the idea of how to respond, right? That may be the difference in life and death of you or someone you love, right? And so that's why we talk about the training. We try to connect people to credible training outlets where people um, really enjoy the sport and fun of firearms, but can really talk about uh, the I wouldn't say downside, but how you need to respond in case of emergency, in case of crisis. You can go to the Gun for Hire website. There are a lot of classes there. I believe my boy Rhino is.
I can't hear you. I don't know what happened. Oh
Are you
no.
there?
Yeah,
All
I
right.
I lost you for a second.
No, I tried to go to a text message. I think my boy Rhino, he may be on somewhere.
I
I
know. Are
don't
you here?
I don't know. He's our trainer for Straps Gun Club. Um, but I wanted to bring him on because he could talk more specifically about the training
He's
process, what training.
he's here. He said if um he said he's available.
Okay,
So
so how do you don't give me the line about how to do all this technology
I
stuff. I'm
can
just
add
getting.
him.
Yeah, bring
Black
him on.
Warrior
Yeah,
Rhino.
yeah, that's
Um
my guy.
okay, so I'll send him a request to add him. Um and if you want to like put some of those resources that you've referenced in the comments um for the people,
Yeah,
I would appreciate it.
and I hope this information has been helpful.
Well, I think it's
Please make sure
been
you like
super
and follow.
helpful. Yeah.
Follow Straps Gun Club, and if you have any questions specifically after this, just shoot us a DM, and I can connect you to the folks. And that's what we do. Again, we're located in New Jersey, in northern New Jersey, and our goal is to really connect people who are eager and interested in the 2A community, and connect them to quality and qualified training outlets, and provide them with some support. It can be very scary for you and your family if you're interested in firearm ownership, but we also want to be, and so we want to be a resource and let you know that, listen, you're not alone. I've experienced those same feelings. And we're also a group of qualified folks who can share credible, accurate and correct information with you from a legal standpoint, stuff that'll keep you out of trouble, keep you out of jail, but also support you and help you prepare for how to deal with crisis.
I tried to
And
add him. It says he's unable to join, so I'm not sure what's going on there. But Black Rhino, Black Warrior Rhino, are you there? Can you join us?
hold on, let me see if I can.
I think he's coming on now. I think. Yeah.
Is there?
Hello.
There he is. Look,
Hey family, how are you?
look at Black Warrior Rhino. What's up, brother?
Introduce yourself to the people, and first of all, thank you for joining. Please introduce yourself to the people and let them know what your connection is uh with Big Jace.
Okay. Well, hi family, how are you? Hopefully everyone is well. Hi, I go by Rhino. Um, I'm former law enforcement from the military. I do tons of technology right now, but what's relative here is the firearm community. Um, I work with Jason, and we've trained quite a bit, and we've done quite a bit of drills. For the most part, my philosophy is that, you know, in today's world, it's irresponsible for you not to have a firearm, for you not to be able to use it. We've seen a ton of transitions and social order, right? We've seen things go from things are peaceful to absolute all out chaos. And one of the things that happens in this first world country is that we get extremely comfortable. And our history as Black people has taught us, if nothing else, you don't get comfortable. You get ready. You get prepared. You be ready to do what you have to do. So I think personally, it's irresponsible for any Black household not to have a firearm and not to be trained to do it. All of my children were trained from ages 5 and up. They see a gun, it's like a fork or a knife. They're not even mesmerized by it. And that's the way things should be because they're devices for defense. Um, so you guys have any specific questions? And I know Jason covered a lot as far as like some of the laws and
Have
so
you been on the entire time,
I have.
or
I have.
okay,
Well,
okay,
most of the time, I think the 8:10 ish, 8:15 ish.
so
So yeah.
yeah, so that wasn't too long after I started, but like I said, my philosophy is like I'm not a gun enthusiast. I'm not like, hey, let's talk about guns because I think so. I'm not saying I'm on the side necessarily that you are. However, I have changed my perspective um, on firearm ownership because, as you pointed out, it is a dangerous world that we live in. Obviously, lots of things are in flux as we speak. Like we saw the situation in, I want to say it was Illinois,
The Kenosha,
Lincoln.
was that Kenosha? Was
No,
that
Oh yeah,
it wasn't
Rittenhouse?
Wisconsin.
where the Black men had to get strapped up, they gripped up, and they had their masks on to take the children to school,
Um,
where they were ready
yeah,
to handle
because
business
because
with the Nazis. That
yes,
situation.
because right,
Oh yeah.
because the Klan came
Yeah.
in
Oh yeah.
trying
Yeah
to,
yeah
harass
yeah.
in this historically Black area,
Yes.
and so and I was proud and impressed to see, us standing up, and not because we are promoting violence, but we're promoting, like, you want to come in here and intimidate us, so if that's your objective, we're prepared for whatever
Right.
happens. So to your point, I do think that it makes sense for you to be prepared for what could potentially happen. It's just sort of the notion, I feel like, that we promote that as sometimes that we promote it as the only solution to a problem. I don't think that you should go from 0 to 100. That's 100 to me.
Well, you know
There
what's
have to
funny?
go ahead.
No, finish your thought, sister.
No, I was just going to say that I feel like anywhere in the training conversation, is there a thought about how to de-escalate a situation before it goes to that extreme. Now, obviously, if somebody's pointing a gun at you, you're going to do what you have to do to defend yourself. But sometimes, like Jason said, you're in the backyard barbecue, and you're having a heated discussion that turns into an argument, and now people got firearms, so everybody wants to be a bad guy, and it escalates when it didn't have to go that far,
Yeah.
right?
I will say this, and
But
kid, you can back me on this. Since I became a firearm owner, I'm the biggest softy. Let me tell you, I don't engage. If the moment voices are raised, I think that's one of the misconceptions about trained and educated firearm owners. Is this after 9 o'clock? I am the biggest little when you know what I mean? Just like, oh no, run. Oh my God, let me get out of here. You know, because I know what once you understand the power that you hold with that fire, that's not anything to take lightly. And a lot of people, it's something that people I think don't, recognize when we're talking about, um, how when you talk about criminals and things like that, well, I'm not talking about those folks. I'm talking about an educated firearm owner. You know the power that you hold with that firearm. So you move different, you talk different, you de-escalate way before it ever gets to anything physical, tense, or anything like that. And the moment you recognize that there is an opportunity for anything to get above a whisper, that's when I'm getting myself and my family out of there. I've been in situations where I had my children at a barbecue and there was someone who was literally provoking me to have a conversation, right? Instead of even having the conversation, I told the guests, listen, I no longer feel comfortable here. I told them why I didn't feel comfortable. I took my kids and I left. It was a kid's birthday party, and I think that as firearm owners, that is the lengths that we go not to use firearms. Not to use firearms. Forget, wanting to use, there is an element of people and can back me up on this that they turn into cowboys when they get there. Oh my God, you know what I mean? They think they're in Dukes of Hazzard. A trained firearm owner is most importantly disciplined.
That is 100% correct. Those who are trained, whether it be in the martial arts or firearms, in combat, period, the last thing we want to do is engage in any type of combat, because the priority is to be responsible with your life, the life of those around you. Um, as a man, my priority is to come home to my family every day, no matter what. So when my priority is that, and there's confrontation, right? These people have no clue what I'm capable of. They don't have a clue what I'm carrying. They're ignorant and of who the potential danger I bring. They also haven't. We live in a very liberal environment. And the unfortunate situation with being in a liberal environment is that there's nothing but fear pushed on those people who live in liberal environments. Whereas in southern environments where there is a conservative thought pattern, they all they think of is, for the most part, family. I just want to go home, mind my business, do what I do, and I don't want to be bothered. But if you cross the line and you endanger the lives of me or my family, I will kill you. I will put you down. And it's a split second decision that's made, that's already been rehearsed in their minds many, many times. We as black people, gun laws did start, all gun laws for the most part started off as racist laws. Let's just get that straight. The first gun laws were that the slaves were not allowed to have guns. Freed men, right after slavery, were not allowed to have guns because they feared retribution, right? We as black people have to get out of the storytelling of ignorant rap, right? Black men are not that. Most of those rappers are not even, they have no clue what they're doing, what they're saying, and it's just ignorant. People who go through the process of getting a firearm permit, getting a permit to carry, people who do all that treasure their freedom. They understand that these are great liabilities, and I will do any and everything not to be in a position where I have to use it, right? So this idea that, a whole bunch of people could just run around and start shooting, and that's not necessarily the case, because people who have that mentality are already doing that illegally, right? They're already carrying guns. They're already doing things, for the most part, that are illegal. They're not respecting the laws. They're not respecting the priority of family. And I think, like I said before, there shouldn't even be a question as to whether or not black people should have guns. You should have a gun. You should know how to protect yourself. If you are in a home and there's a knock on your door, you go to open your door, and then the back door gets kicked in, and there are 4 or 5 people coming to do a home invasion. I don't care what kind of hand skills you have. I don't care how scary you think you sound. If there are 4 people coming into that door, and it's just you or it's just 2 people, these people are armed. They've chosen the time. They've chosen the venue, right? They've chosen the weaponry that they're going to bring. You need to choose to defend your household, which is preemptive, right? So I think the discussion of whether you should have a gun or not, that shouldn't even be a discussion anymore, right? It should simply be, what kind of gun? Who do I go for training with? What are some of the best resources to find out how to engage, and when to engage, and when to de-escalate, and be connected to the local police. I train local police in my town, right? also do qualifications. I'm NRA certified. I've done all of this gun crap, right? And I will say this, the last thing I ever want to do is use my gun. But please make no mistake, somebody kicks my door in right now. If my pit bull doesn't eat them alive, I'm putting the person down, because we have to be capable of protecting ourselves and our family. That's not even a question anymore. We just watched 3 years ago, 2022, Ukraine. Everything was going fine. Things were perfect. People were taking their kids to school, opening up bakeries, going to school. They were working, businesses. Then all of a sudden, in one day, women and children had to walk 10 plus hours in a direction away from their homes. Their husbands were killed, the children were killed, wives were killed. People were dying just like that because a war jumped off. We're not that safe as you think in America. We have so many terror cell sites, and I don't mean to put it out there like, dude, to be
Okay, I was
scary.
gonna say, like, I don't.
But I will say this, right? There are too many variables out there that we are unaware of.
Right.
And we need to be prepared, not only with firearms, but we need to make sure we have water in our homes. We need to make sure that we can survive at least 2 weeks to a month without having to leave your home, because things can happen,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So, and I want to get back to just the firearm portion of it. There are too many resources out here for us as a people to be able to connect and to share and to have a level of insight on what we can do to protect ourselves. Just a
Yeah.
lot. Jason has done a lot for the community. He's still doing tons. That's why I deal with him. He's a really good guy, down to earth guy, you know, family man, right? Like if you know him, right? He is like the quintessential corny black
I,
dude. And I'm saying
I
it
know,
because,
I know Jason in
you
real life, so yes.
know,
I'm not.
I,
I don't think he's corny, but
no,
I
I'm
know.
saying from
I
if you were
know.
to just meet Jason, right?
I know.
Well spoken, very well mannered.
Clearly,
He has a wife. He has children. He's a responsible guy. He's the corny guy in the hood, right? But he's ready to do what he has to do, and he's responsible. He takes his family's life seriously, whether it be in economics, physical safety,
Right.
social awareness, right? He's an awesome man. Those people who are the Jason types, you'll find many of them are firearm owners, very responsible. They're not just going to start pulling out and shooting it. That's really a myth.
well,
Right.
and it wasn't my intention wasn't to imply that anyone who has a gun is just out here, you know, going crazy, shooting all over the place. I'm not suggesting that. And why I asked Jason, because I know that he owns this club, was to have someone who's knowledgeable, educated, and to your point, not out living the thug life, to talk about the topic of responsible gun ownership
Right.
and why it is important, for communities of color, especially with the changing, dynamic of this country. I mean, yes, we've been in a place like this in the past, but I wasn't alive then. And I don't, I'm not sure how old you are. I know Jason wasn't. So we didn't haven't necessarily lived through that experience, the folks here, but things are trending in that direction again. So yes, we need to take a different approach. And yes, maybe passivity is not the correct approach. Is
I would
just to be
say
prepared for whatever.
I didn't. My apologies. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
Can I call you Becky? Can we call you Becky for in case of
sure,
Becky
fine.
Brown? Becky Brown girl for
Yes. Well, that's what they call me on
that's
here. So
because all right,
yes.
Becky Brown girl. I think I love talking to Rhino because one, you could when it comes to this stuff for persons of color, he's the smartest guy I know when it comes to this. And when stuff kicks off, he'll tell you. I call him like, "Yo, what's going on?" If I think it's something, I don't pick up the phone often, but when I do, I'm like, "Hey." What do we need to be prepared for? You know what I mean? And he'll tell you, I'll call him. But I think that's what Straps has done, is that it created a network, a resource. There's a lot of movies that come out about these, like, end of days and what'll happen and all of these things. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, so to speak, but I think, like, what if your power goes out for more than a day? What if, like, we just a natural forget Armageddon? Let's just say God's will, natural disasters. Literally something. The blackout of what was that? 2010 or what it
I
was.
don't remember, but
You
I know what
know,
you're talking about.
the
Yeah.
the big blackout that shut everything out. Like, nothing. Out of the, not enough